After many people requested an Oblex and I took a look at what they can do, well, I totally get why now. They are powerful, unique, have tons of great role-playing options, and just look awesome. However, to just see an Oblex and kill it in a traditional combat encounter would be such a waste of its gifts. So what if your players never needed to actually see it to get a lot out of it? And so the goal of today's encounter is to create a scenario where, yes, your players can work together to uncover a grand secret, but actually never need to discover it to enjoy what it brings to your game. This situation will also create an easy way to feed your players information whenever you need to in a fun and mysterious way. Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to my hidden nerdy side, and today we're tackling the gooey mind flayer experiment known as the Oblex. We are going to take a look at their lore, info, and abilities, and then build an encounter you can steal, modify, and plop straight into your D&D games. And to make sure this video is a decent length, we'll only be pulling the Oblex lore, info, and abilities that exist within Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which can be found on pages 217 to 219. So without further ado, let's take a look at Oblex. So as mentioned in the intro, Oblex are oozes who originated in the Underdark and were created by mind flayers to help in their evil doings. How do they do so? Well, by eating and storing the memories of their targets. Oblex feed on these memories, and the more intelligent their food is, the tastier it is, and the more sustenance is provided. Now, not only can Oblex absorb information about their targets and their personality, which causes them to grow bigger in size, but eventually Oblex can also create duplicate forms of a creature they previously devoured and imitate them to a T. However, every Oblex has a limit to how many personalities they can absorb, and once an Oblex reaches its limit, another smaller Oblex is spawned with a twisted version of a personality the Oblex now has to discard in order to make room. Now, when we jump over to their actions and abilities, oh boy, do we have some spicy stuff to play with. So there are 3 Oblex stat blocks: Oblex Spawn, Adult Oblex, and Elder Oblex. The star of our encounter will be an Elder Oblex, but to quickly go over all their similarities, every Oblex has 60 feet of blind sight, pseudopods, can squeeze through spaces as narrow as 1 inch, and has a built-in weakness to fire, which causes any Oblex hit with a fiery attack to have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the end of their next turn. Now, the last part is pretty important because in D&D 5e, fire spells make up damn near half of all damage spells. And don't get me wrong, I love when creatures have specific traits and abilities players can exploit, but since half of your spellcasters are gonna have fire spells, you will probably need to give your Oblex some minions or even homebrew some effects where if it's doused with water, it can negate the effects of its aversion to fire trait, which would add another layer to combat as your players try to prevent it from happening. Now, when we jump up to our Elder Oblex, it gains some pretty insane spells that help it control the battlefield and escape when necessary, such as Dimension Door, Dominate Person, Hallucinatory Terrain, and Hypnotic Pattern. But the 2 keystone abilities of our featured creature are Eat Memories and Sulphurous Impersonation. With Eat Memories, on a failed Wisdom saving throw, an Oblex devours the memories of a creature next to them, and this does a few things. 1, the Oblex obtains the target's memories. 2, it deals a lot of psychic damage. And 3, the target is inflicted with a condition called Memory Drain, which lasts until the target rests or someone casts Greater Restoration or Heal on them. While a target is memory drained, the target subtracts a d4 from every attack roll and ability check it makes. But this effect stacks each time the target fails its saving throw, which increases the die roll every time. So if your target was memory drained once, the die they subtract is a d4. If your target is drained twice, it's now a d6. On 3 times, it's now a d8, and so on up to a d20. And if your target is still alive after that, which they probably won't be, the next stack causes the target to go unconscious for an hour. So other than the awesome role-playing potential, this ability can be really devastating to your martial classes, because even a -D4 can drastically change the flow of combat, let alone a D8 or higher. And after an Elder Oblex has devoured enough juicy brains, it can use sulfurous impersonation, which essentially allows it to create an indistinguishable simulacrum of a personality it has stored in its body. However, this simulacrum can only move 120 feet away from the Oblex and is attached to it by a very small slimy tether, which is roughly an inch wide. Now, despite the Oblex simulacrum imitating the creature almost perfectly, there is one dead giveaway, other than the tether of course, and that is if a creature is able to get close enough to give your simulacrum a good sniff, it will have a faint smell of sulfur. What's important to note about this ability is an Oblex simulacrum is technically just a part of your Oblex, so an attack against the simulacrum would count as an attack against the Oblex's main body. So this ability really exceeds more in role-playing situations than combat, unless you have to get into a specific position to cast a spell. So there are only two homebrew changes we're going to make, and the first one is more of a clarification and nailing down of a specific combat mechanic, but our Elder Oblex is going to be brimming with personalities and can't contain any more. So when it successfully uses Eat Memories on a player, it will create a new Oblex spawn every time that forms 5 feet in an unoccupied space next to the Elder Oblex. However, we will also say these Oblex spawn can speak common, and this is purely so they can imitate the players the Elder Oblex eats and mock them during combat for some extra spicy shenanigans. Okay, so now that we've gone over the basic Oblex lore, info, and abilities, let's build an encounter. This encounter/quest will be aimed at parties level 10 to 15 for the final battle, but you can easily introduce our Oblex as early as level 1 if you really wanted to, and this series of encounters will last as long as your players want them to. The party's motivation should always be tailored to your campaign, but for simplicity's sake, we'll say your players will continue to engage with this creature because doing so will grant them close to any information they could desire. So in your world, preferably in a big city, there will be an organization called the Masa Ista, derived from the Elvish words for shared knowledge. The leader is known as the Fountain, as in the Fountain of Knowledge, but not even the majority of the Masa Ista's own members know the Fountain's true identity. This organization offers the service of information. If people have the coin or an appropriate alternative payment, the Masa Ista will tell its customers almost anything they could ever want to know. In fact, this organization is highly regarded for its ability to produce information, and its knowledgeable reach extends way past the city's limits, and deals with information gathering throughout your world, and are only identifiable by the members who choose to don their sigil, which is a skull with the top of it cut off and hovering above it. No one knows how the Masa Ista are so good at what they do, but none seem to question their methods, for those who are allowed to speak with them are either clients or creatures soon to die for poking their nose in places it doesn't belong. So while your players are in this city, for some reason you or your players decide, they will need to obtain information to complete a quest, and people in the city will recommend trying to seek out the Masa Ista. Except there's one problem. Few people know where they're located, and fewer know the password required to do business with them. All people know is if you know the password, you speak to the bartender at the Rusty Hammer and she'll guide you to them. On top of that, the password changes every month, and only regular customers are sent word of what the new password is. So this creates a fun opportunity for your players to do some sneaky investigation work. Maybe they tail the bartender, maybe they try to bribe her, maybe they do a small job for her so she knows she can trust them, or whatever. But once your party gets the password, they will be taken to a secret location on the outskirts of town. In an abandoned warehouse basement, there will be a corridor about 20 feet high and 20 feet wide, with a red carpet that leads to a single counter. There will be a black curtain behind the counter that's drawn shut, and a white line painted on the ground 5 feet before the counter. A large metal drawer that's currently closed will be to the left of the counter, and to the right, there will be an iron golem standing at attention. When your players enter the area, an elven man dressed in proper noble clothing will appear from the curtain and ask your players for the password. Upon a correct response, this elven man, who we'll call Hadriel, will be very prim, proper, and courteous, like he's a maitre d' at a fancy restaurant. However, if your players ever step over the white line without Hadriel's permission, the iron golem will crank its head, stare at the offender, and draw its weapon as a warning, for no one is allowed to step over the white line without permission. Hadriel will state he speaks on the fountain's behalf, and will tell your players any secret or information he has if your players pay the right price. If your players want to speak with the fountain, Hadriel will state he is the only one who is allowed to speak with the fountain directly. So, based on what your party wants, the Masaista will provide them with the information they need. Now, the Masaista isn't omniscient, but they will know quite a bit about most things. Gossip at the royal court, select information on evildoers, criminal activity going on in the city, and so on. However, if the price is too high, the Masaista also provides alternative methods of payment, for the Masaista also offers special services for its preferred clientele, which is to hunt down specific targets. And if your players bring someone back for the Masaista, they'll give your party the information for free. Who you choose the target to be doesn't matter so much, but there is one condition. The target must be brought back alive. So, why is this? Well, because the fountain is an elder Oblex. And yes, the Masaista has spies and operatives as well, but tons of secret, nuanced information that no one else would know comes from the elder Oblex constantly devouring creatures and gaining their memories until pieces of whatever puzzle fall into place. And yes, your players are not allowed to see the fountain, but yet technically are, for Hadriel will actually be an elder Oblex simulacrum, which is why no one is allowed to come within 5 feet of the counter, for then it would be possible to smell the sulfur and potentially see the tiny tether attached to his ankle creeping behind the black curtain. So now your party can either pay for information or go on as many side quests as they want to obtain more and more info from the Masaista, never knowing they're actually feeding an elder Oblex. And as your party does more and more business with them, you could also have the Masaista start to hire your party specifically, since your players are constantly going to far-off locations where creatures filled with ancient knowledge could be. This also opens up terrific role-playing opportunities for you and your players, as they have to figure out the best way to bring a target back alive without it escaping or being caught, and can also have deep conversations with the targets trying to figure out what they possibly did to deserve being hunted. However, the only things all the targets will have in common are their high intellect, the fact their bodies have to be brought back alive, and the targets are not sure why they're being hunted, or at least would have no idea they're actually being hunted by an Oblex. Other than that, you can easily drag and drop any encounter that requires a captured target. Now, the motivation of your Oblex can purely just be the greedy, simple reason of they want to eat more and more bodies so they can feast on more and more memories, and profiting from their organization helps bring in more and more juicy brains. But if you want to make your elder Oblex a major player in your world, which it certainly has the potential to be, it could have grander plans to obtain brains, and uses the organization to increase its wealth so it can start producing farms of creatures, where they feed and teach people until they're intelligent enough to be feasted on. You could also have the Oblex be a servant of your big bad, particularly if it's a mind flayer or an elder brain. The Oblex could feed them information about all the happenings in your world, and potentially feed your party false intel down the road if your big bad needs the players away from a specific location. There are many other motivations you can bestow on your Oblex, but in the end, unless your players go digging for it, your Oblex's true identity never even has to be revealed. Your players can do business with this organization all campaign long and never find find the truth, and that's what makes it so great. But if you truly wish to have the secret come out eventually, one in-character way to do that would be to have the Oblex get greedy and come to the realization that your players go to a bunch of interesting locations and have seen some incredible things. So I bet their brains are filled with some amazing memories to munch on. And so all your Oblex has to do is hire the party for a job at a select location, where the Masaista will be waiting to ambush them. Upon surviving, your party will probably be pissed and storm the Masaista HQ, where an Elder Oblex and an Iron Golem will be waiting to take them on. So, a criminal organization that can integrate into any homebrew setting, that provides your players with the information they need, and is an endless collection of side quests? I think this is all quite spicy enough, but if we wanted to, how can we make it even spicier? Well, one way would be to make sure the Masaista are seen in multiple locations throughout your world, so your players can truly envision them as an all-knowing organization. So having Masaista members sprinkled in random areas and being seen bringing people back to the Oblex is a great way to make them feel like a real entity. Another way is to tie the quest the Oblex hires your party for back into your main quest in ways that might not be apparent at first. 2 birds, 1 stone, you get the drill. And finally, if you're feeling extra spicy, what if your Oblex became so powerful that the mind flayers who created it now work for it? So all the creatures waiting to ambush your players at their setup location are more than just mere company droogs. But of course, this is just one of many ways you can use Oblex in your Dungeons & Dragons campaigns. But if you do use this in your future games, make sure to let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.